Okay, folks out there, you know how this goes, right? People have requested out of the Kyroots you just heard, if you heard them, and I'm going to try and make some additional comment thereon if it seems apropos, and if anybody can tell me what apropos means. See if I want to fool this one. Okay, it was one of these insider tips from Kyroot again. And it goes, only the simple are laughed at and ignored. I assume that you people won't take the first one personally. I know I didn't. Only the simple are laughed at and ignored. And a highly complex gentleman in the rear said, I just love it. Nobody wants to fool with that? Only the simple are laughed at. Now many people can buy into that, I'm sure, and go, ha, how true. Now the simple deserve it. That means, only the simple are laughed at and ignored. Now see, the first part would be all right because everyone, if they paid attention, could go along with that to some degree because everyone looks at their fellow man and thinks, what a simpleton. And they deserve to be laughed at. But then you got this whole string of dots, much more than periods than are called for with a literal, you know what. And it says, and ignored, because then that puts a certain kind of inverted monkey grip into the machinery. Because then you think, wait a minute, what does that infer? Well, one thing, you can get by in the city. Several ways to describe it. Lay low, and I'm not referring to those of you, to the pianist from Brazil. You can keep a low profile. But all you got to do really, well, let me throw in a couple more. You can be sans variety, totally unoriginal, have a kind of creative spark somewhere around the general area of tapioca, have the dazzling, intellectual, artistic drive that would put the walls of a cheap apartment to shame. You can do all of that, and you can describe that as being fairly safe in the city. And this is, I fear to say, metaphorical. It's not just symbolic because, of course, that's true in life. And people that verge on some sort of psychological pathology, not sexual, that's another one, psychological pathology, will even take that approach, but I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about people that want to curl up into a little ball and hide. We're talking about ordinary people that have to get out there and hump it every day. But still, you can get out there and hump it, and you try to keep your hump kind of at a reasonable hump level so that you're not noticed, so that life does not roll around and try and squish you. But there's another way to look at it. Not just those that would try to do that. The other way is, and people do not plan it, is why the second part here, and ignore it, sort of runs it. Because for life to ignore you, at the ordinary level, this is where it gets metaphorical, not just symbolic, because it's true on both levels. For life to ignore you, it's just the ordinary. From an ordinary view, you've got to have no sign of originality. There's nothing wrong with that. Not at that level. Nay, nay. That's why people try and look around and say, well, I want to be fashionable. What's everybody else doing? So that you can be fashionable. As you march across the great battlefield of life, what you want, no matter to yourself and to those right next to you on either side, you're talking big deals and originality, and boy, don't you hate these army greens. Boy, if they could get a little splash of red or purple in here, if they'd let me wear a feather. Now you say all of that, but as the bullets of life fly, sometimes known as the days of the year, the hours of the day, as they fly by, people do not give due credit because they're continually, even those who are atheists, are whispering in their hearts little prayers, thank God I'm surrounded by such a bunch of other motherfuckers that look like I do. Because, hell, they can get shot. I don't have to be shot. But you show any originality in what can happen. Well, you know what can happen. I'm sure that there are books somewhere in the area of psychology that it's meaningless, but I'm sure this has got to have been observed at the ordinary level. That the way they would put it would be on the basis of it being the forerunner of some neuroses, that is, that some child tries to be original and his parents or his teacher says, don't do that. You can't draw men with 3 legs. The sky is not purple. I'm sure. And then they describe it. And look at this poor child now. I mean, now he's a 52-year-old child sitting at the end of a bar with his, his nose looking like a road map. And they say, you know why? It's because, we could trace it, it's because a teacher one time says, the sky's not purple. And it crushed his little soul. It crushed any embryonic possibility of creativity. Again, we're not talking, even at a metaphorical level, you came and use that as a metaphorical example, with those that from the ordinary view are in any way less than middle of the road, middle class. So we're not saying that, but I just want you to see that even ordinary life takes that into account. Foolishly, uselessly, as far as an individual using that. But if you are showing no originality, no talent, no individuality, but you can show individuality, nobody asked me, I still feel that you people don't get that enough, that that's part of what being fashionable is. I know every time I do it, a few of you go, how cute. And probably some of you fall into some kind of stupor and think, boy, it's ironic. No, you're missing it. It's beautiful. It's life dancing with you, and you don't even realize it. That is people being fashionable. What is being fashionable? At the ordinary level, being fashionable, tastefully up to date in your dress, your taste in music. What is it? It's to have the same taste as your peers do. How do you know that you're an individual? How do you know that you're fashionable? Well, I'm dressed like everybody else. Well, everybody else that counts. Of course, you knew that. What's your taste in music? I am on the cutting edge. I stay there. Which is, well, and you name the cutting edge station, or you point to people and you say, you see that group of cutting edge folks? Yes. I have the same taste they do. Look, I'll wave and they'll wave back. See, they know me. That is what passes, and it's supposed to, for originality, being fashionable. Back to the Kyroot. Only the simple are laughed at. See, and everybody likes that. Even ordinary people, ha ha ha. ... and ignored. See, nobody likes that. And of course, they could explain why. It's simple. Because it doesn't make any sense. Oh. See, if you'd told me that to begin with, we wouldn't have spent enough time on that. The guy told his kid, being middle class is proofreading your life. That's self-explanatory, isn't it? Isn't it? Well, it's one way. It's another connection to the first one that was asked for, the one I just did. It is one form of not being in any way creative, not running any risk of being individual to the point that you might get your toes stepped on. Proofread your life. At the ordinary level, again, ordinary people must. That is part of what being civilized is having enough authority resting or vested in those living upstairs in the condo that can say, now look, we're not going outside dressed like that. And the people in the basement can whine, and you can say, well, I love to dress like this. And you say, no, but you're going out to be around such a group of people that could be in your best interest financially, socially, and you cannot do that. So you must proofread your life. It is being able to, at the ordinary level, first we're speaking of, is being able to override gross desires, to proofread your life. There is no middle ground to talk about with ordinary people, because the only alternative to that, if you're an ordinary person following into that, you would think would be to be what? Probably insane. To be radical in the ordinary sense, to be almost feral in your behavior, to be very unsociable, to be unsocialized, not be the kind of person that you would want to invite around to dinner if you were using good china and had some nice glasses. You would just think, well, you're saying that if you don't proofread your life and civilize, you've got to be some kind of wild-eyed person running in the streets. And you can't, there's no way that the human mind can come up with an alternative. There's nothing in between. Well, they could try verbally to come up with it, but if you say, well, give me an example. They can't think of one. Have you ever seen anybody do it? No. Can you really feel that it could be done? No. It's like you're either, it just comes down to it. To make it really direct, an ordinary person would say, all right, you're either a decent, law-abiding person or you're not. There is no in-between. You don't have to be religious, they could say. I don't mean that you're following some particular religious dogma, but I'm just saying you have got to be an honest, civilized, decent member of your community, or else you're some kind of outlaw. There is no in-between. I mean, it's like you can't go around and slightly mug somebody. You can't go in and just partially, sort of semi-civilized, burgle their house. Don't have you people with weird imaginations worry? There is such a word as burgle. Burgle. Well, I know a couple of you look funny that used to be in the Navy, and I don't want to think about it. No man told a kid being middle class is proofreading your life. A viewer wrote to ask. I'm sorry, no viewer wrote in to ask. This is the addendum. No viewer wrote in to ask if this meant metaphorically anything regarding the way people think. Well, since no viewer wrote in, I don't have to respond. Somebody requested one, but there are actually several here that are in some ways connected. So I'll read the several that were. And Kyroots said, no one with anything the least bit better to do wants to hear anything about the revolution, which in part is what cities are for. Additional urban tip. Rules required to protect the city may not do you any good personally. I feel sure that I can make that verbally quite crude, but it's similar to what I was just talking about. Slightly different view of it, that you could say that that which supports the needs for a civilized society may not do you any good personally. An ordinary person could say, well, that's no news at all. That's always been true, because to be part of a civilized group, we must give up certain of our individual wants and desires, even some of our, perhaps, freedoms, for the good of the community, for the greater good of a large group of people. And if they took this as being any attack on that, then they can dismiss this completely as saying, well, that's insane, or else you are literally, not figuratively, you are some sort of anarchist or radical in some political sense, because there is no middle ground. You have to simply, and they're correct at that level, you're correct, or they would be correct to say that you must give up part of your individuality. And forget about you got to dress like people and pay taxes and all that. If that's what's making you sweat, you deserve to sweat. You're not even close to the revolution. Everybody's got to do that. Ha ha ha. Well, we're on television. We all must do fulfill our basic civil duties like taxes and voting and putting our garbage in the correct kind of container. I mean, there's no question about that. We're not even talking about that. It is on a much, it's not even subtle, we're back to the same problem. There is no middle ground that the mind can ordinarily describe. Because if you tried to say in response to the ordinary mind, the part I just played, saying, well, this Kyroot about rules required to protect the city may not do you any good personally, they would say, well, all you're doing is trying to take some sort of shot at the fact that to be civilized, we must give up a little of our individual wants and freedoms, etc. If we're going to be civilized and have the kind of life that we now have, you cannot walk down the street and see somebody eating a delicious banana push-up and say, you can't do it. You might want to. But there's a Kyroots in here that points out that civilization, back to the question of the continual dual possibility we're talking about of either thinking about acting or acting itself, that society, civilization with ordinary people only requires that you control your behavior, not your thought. Of course, there was another piece of that Kyroots, but since nobody asked for it, I don't think. But at any rate, so they're saying you cannot do that. And civilization, if it responded, or an ordinary person, they would say, this is not to deny the fact that you could be walking along the same as a 5-year-old child and see somebody with an ice cream, something you wanted, a wagon, and you want to grab it. But my God, sir, you're a grown man. So we're not saying that you don't have such a desire, but to be civilized, you've got to give that up. You've got to understand you cannot take that. Go buy yourself one. Go get a job. Get some food coupons and go trade it in for a popsicle. But you can't just take it. And if they had that attitude, which is proper, then they would say, well, what in the hell does this mean then? There is no middle ground. You can't go up and just take part of something that somebody has. You can't go up and just partially be uncivilized. I'm simply going to reread it. Kyroots said, rules required to protect the city may not do you any good personally. This, no matter how you cut it, would not do an ordinary person any good. I'm talking about this Kyroot. None. None. If anything, if they tried to do anything with it, it'd do them harm. And if it didn't do their harm, it could do us harm. Because I don't want to be around people like that, not ordinary people. It's only real civilized people can be uncivilized. Or if you want it another way, it's only a rebel that can actually be uncivilized, and then it's a secret. Another Kyroot hidden weight we're not going to get to about the guy that had a secret motto. Huh? Well, it wasn't a secret motto. I think it just said that there was a guy that just didn't give a rat's ass. But, no. And that was a big old dice, and it said but. And here's the most important part. You know, he wouldn't let on, and he didn't actually mean it. And even if he did, it only applied to a specific segment of life. You notice it doesn't do any good when you don't ask for them, because sometimes I do them anyway. I don't mean to, but I'm trying. It's a memory. I've been reading a book on how to do my memory. You know, what do you call it? Well, there's a word. I forget what it is. But and so I try to remember something. I sit there and herd, and I try to tie them together, or at least show off and like, well, this is related. Rules required to protect the city may not do you any good personally. You have got to be beyond. You did follow where I was trying to get you to see. This doesn't even qualify as an ordinary. This is not even a cheap aphorism. This is not a maxim of any kind. This is useless. At best, at worst, an ordinary person would be dangerous. It would only take somebody unordinary that could use this to even understand it. That which is required to protect the city. And now, could you forget about civilization? Could you forget about society? Forget about the world out there to help you? That which may help you in toto, that which may help your entire being, may not be of any particular use to you personally. Where do you personally live? Because you're an ordinary person, you live downstairs somewhere. You may aspire, you may be clutching up the elevator shaft, trying if you can talk. You got your fingernails up there on some higher floor. But if there's anything approaching originality, another Kyroot, where is it? It's in your pants. It is below the waist. That's the only place that people can normally show any form of originality, which, by the way, does not exclude paintings on walls, symphonies, and etc. No, that takes high spirit, yes, but it's from the waist down. Take those kind of artists, take those kind of composers, those kind of literary men, and castrate them. And see what you get. You don't have art. It is hormones that are running that kind of art. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's not recognized for what it is. So now, would you take this? Rules required to protect the city may not do you any good personally. Now forget the city and people out there and civilization holding everything together. Rules to protect you. That is, to get you through the battlefield, to get you down the march through 60 or 70 years. That which protects you in toto may not do you personally much good. Work on that. Which is easy to say now that time's run out. Because you can say, well, you're going to explain it, right? Well, I'm sorry. Bye. We're out of time.